Welcome into, I think that's how we're starting.
Lower your seat, Barth.
To a brand new episode
weird.
of the Sports Hub Patriots podcast. Alex Barth, Matt Dolloff with you, 98.5thesportshub.com. A little post-Super Bowl off-season intro edition. And look, we've been talking off-season for a month now. This feels kind of ridiculous, but we are here. The NFL as a whole is in the off-season. I put my first mock draft of the year out this morning on 98.5thesportshub.com. So we're going to kind of do a little bit of both, react to the Super Bowl, get into the offseason. There's certainly some crossover there because I like to say every Super Bowl, like there's a lesson to be learned, right? It's a copycat league. What are teams going to take from the game? We'll call that a spoiler. We'll get into that in a little bit. But because it is the Sports Hub Patriots podcast, Dolph, how do you feel about the Chiefs coaching staff?
Oh, horrible. And I mean, we talked a little bit about it off the air right before we came on that as surprised as I was that Steve Spagnuolo didn't have his exotic pass rush packages wreaking havoc on Jalen Hurts, which I thought was a distinct possibility. They did a pretty good job of limiting Saquon Barkley. He didn't make a huge impact.
Seemed to be their whole plan was take away Saquon Barkley.
Yeah. I think that just shows that like when you have a running back that's that good and a running game that's that good, you can be a real factor just by making the other team account for it. So there was that, but I think it sort of was to the detriment that they gave up some big passing plays to Jalen Hurts and that Eagles offense. But yeah, no, obviously the story of the game was how the Eagles defense played up front and how they just couldn't be stopped. The Chiefs had no answers for that. I think the Chiefs' problems on the offensive line got exposed. And I think we've been talking a lot, Barth, about how, like, you don't need all pros across the offensive line league. You do need, like, decent, good players. I think Mike Caliendo was, he really struggled out there, and they never really kicked Joe Thuney back inside. So that's where I look at Andy Reid and that offensive coaching staff, is that they never really had an answer for what the Eagles were doing up front. No adjustments up front on their line. No adjustments with what they were doing in terms of play calling, scheme. Like, they looked unprepared. And it's surprising because I thought this was supposed to be the gold standard of the league in terms of playing and coaching, that they were going to be the more prepared team, the more disciplined team and all that. They were going to have a better plan and they were going to execute it better and play better. They didn't do any of that stuff last night. So it was a terrible night for Patrick Mahomes, obviously, which we can get into, but it was just as bad a night for Andy Reid, I thought, and the fact that they didn't look ready to go and they had no adjustments to make. It was a bad night all around.
Well, let's not forget how the season began. Nick Sirianni was on the hot seat, right? Philadelphia was like among the favorites to land Bill Belichick. Vic Fangio, players were celebrating in Miami when he got let go there. Kellen Moore was another cast off. He's going to go be a head coach now. And so you mentioned the gold standard for coaching up against this staff that a lot of people had questions about. Got circles coached around them. And let's do the Patriots dynasty stuff first, and then we'll get into the game itself. The Brady Mahomes stuff, which you have a column up right now on 98.5thesportshub.com about, very valid conversation. Don't want to take away from that conversation. Brady never played like that in a Super Bowl. Not once. And Mahomes is still well behind him in rings, and that needs to be put to the side. Let's not lose track in taking that victory lap as Patriots fans. Like, the Belichick-Reid conversation was happening too. Bill Belichick would have never gotten pants like that in a Super Bowl. And specifically, like, if we're going to assign blame, and it really was a blowout. It was a 34-6 game. The Chiefs stat padded there late. Was the defense perfect? No. But it was a much worse game from the Chiefs offense than it was from the Chiefs defense. And you have Andy Reid, who's supposed to be one of the greatest offensive minds of all time. They didn't do a ton to adjust. There wasn't a ton creative offensively. And if you want to tell me, well, they were limited because of their line, well, work around it. That's what good coaches do. You find ways to have success without that. 39 yards passing in the first half is a lot more than the offensive line wasn't holding up. Mix in a screen, mix in something, and they didn't. So you never saw a Belichick defense get embarrassed like that, the way you saw Andy Reid's offense get embarrassed for the first 50 minutes of that 60-minute game.
I mean, well, if we want to be fair, though, Super Bowl 52, they didn't get embarrassed defensively, Patriots.
Well, all right, that's fair.
I know it's a little different because Belichick just like benched Malcolm Butler inexplicably. We'll never know why, and he sort of almost punished himself with that game. But look, I'm not going to go so far as that Bill Belichick never had a bad Super Bowl or never had a bad day in the playoffs. And like Beatle's been talking about this today on Zolak and Bertram. We're like, we can't punish Patrick Mahomes for playing like that in a Super Bowl when you've had the Patriots have had bad games in like the divisional round, the wild card, like the Patriots got their ass kicked in the 2009 wild card game, for instance, against the Ravens, right? But I think you add them all up, and like it was just a little more shocking to see it happen on this stage with everybody watching, the whole football world watching. But yeah, like I think the Patriots never really had that big of a letdown on that big of a stage.
Yeah,
that's true. I just think you have to sort of look at the totality of it. But that's my whole take, is that Mahomes is halfway to Tom Brady. He's halfway. And Andy Reid, like I think the whole like coaching wins thing is a little overrated anyway. Like that's really just longevity. I think you want to pick one coach to come up with a game plan. I think everybody should pick Bill Belichick over Andy Reid. As great as Andy Reid is on offense.
Yeah, again, to go back to the Super Bowl 52 thing, and it is a good point on that. But like, yeah, Reid had, I mean, those were the players they've had all year, and they weren't scoring a ton. They only scored more than 30 in one game. It was the AFC Championship, but they were scoring. They were shut out until late into that game. And
this is a 34-0 game. I don't even I discount everything. Once it got to 34-0, the game was over. I pretty much discount everything after that.
I think, from the Belichick standpoint, from the Brady standpoint, from the dynasty standpoint, overall, people were getting way too comfortable making those comparisons. And the Chiefs are probably, I shouldn't say probably, I think the Chiefs are the best team since you go to 3 in a row. They still won. So it's still 3-5, right? Because they won 1, lost 1, didn't go, and then won 2. Mm-hmm. So they won 3-5. They went to what, 4-6, 5-6, something like
5 of 6.
So like
appearances in the Super. Look, they're the the 90s Cowboys. They're in that tier of dynasty right now. Like they're a dynasty. They're a great team. We're not going to take that away from them. It's just the Patriots comparisons. They're not even close to that.
It's different, and they got to go another 10 years. And I just feel like, and this can kind of get us to that game. Like they have some work to do because they have to work on that offensive line. The offensive line needs to be better. And tell me if this sounds familiar, talking about a team like this kind of after winning a stretch of Super Bowls. They need to fix the offensive line. They need to get the quarterback or receiver. And the secondary is getting a little old. They have Trent McDuffie, obviously, as a corner piece, but besides that, so they're going to have to turn. And then who knows what's going to happen with Andy Reid? He said he's going to be back next year, and I believe that. But
he's not going to be coaching when he's 75 years old.
I'd say he's year to year at this point. Is that after next year?
If Mahomes is still playing in the NFL at age 40, he's not going to have Andy Reid as a coach. He's obviously not going to have Travis Kelce. He's probably going to have
he might not have Travis Kelce next year.
Yeah, he's going to have a whole new team around him by the time he gets to the end of his career, and he's still trying to match Brady. And this is where I think people are wrong, where it's like the debate's over.
Right.
I saw a lot of people, don't ever put Patrick Mahomes in the same sentence as Tom Brady. Don't ever do it again. It's all over. It's not over. I think the debate should have never even started.
Right.
The conversation should have never even started. I said we're in the prologue right now. We're not even in chapter 1 of what could be a Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady debate down the road if he gets to, he gets a couple more rings.
Right.
But like, that shouldn't have even been a conversation. It should have never even started. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not even that it's over. It's that it should have never even started. And he still has a chance. Like, look, he could come back and win the Super Bowl next year. He could win 3-4 more Super Bowls. It's not, we can't shut the door on that yet. But like, this is why, like, there shouldn't even been a conversation at this point.
Right.
And I think it was great to sort of shut that down.
Yeah.
Where it's like, if the debate was a house, Barth.
Yeah.
Mahomes and the Chiefs have been kicked out of the house. The debate was there, but it shouldn't even been started. He shouldn't even been let in the house. We called the authorities, the Philadelphia Eagles, and they have kicked the Chiefs out of the house. They can wait. They can get back in at some point, but wait out there, get a few more Super Bowls, and then maybe we can start the conversation.
Speaking of the Eagles, so watching that game last night, I thought back to, I don't remember, you were there for the joint practice against the Eagles, right? That the Patriots had back in the summer. Were you there that day?
Was it this past year?
Yeah.
Oh my God. All the days blend together at this point.
So I remember.
I was there. Yes.
Like.
Oh yeah. They got killed.
But remember the Eagles defensive front dominated.
Yeah. That was the story of the day.
But I remember it was to the point where, like, the way we were writing about it, the way we were talking about it, fans who weren't there were like, you got to be exaggerating. You're just hating on the Patriots. Like, there's no way it's bad. No,
it was bad.
What you saw last night was what they did to the Patriots. And that's not to give any sort of justification to the Patriots offensive line, but like, That's a real freaking group, man. That group up front is there's just talent everywhere. Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Josh Sweat, Milton Williams. I'm missing a bunch of guys from that. But
Josh Sweat was also a guy who dominated that joint practice.
Yeah, Josh Sweat was awesome in that joint practice. And so it was just, I kind of thought back to that because it's like, oh, yeah, I saw this in person. And we saw it in that practice setting. And the Patriots got to get themselves some of that. And a lot of those guys are free agents. Maybe it's one of those guys exactly. But when Mike Vrabel...
Josh Sweat might have just gotten a little more expensive.
Well,
should have been Super Bowl MVP.
He should have been. You're right. They have the most cap space in the league, but so it shouldn't be a problem. When Mike Vrabel had his introductory press conference and he was asked about priorities for the offseason, one of the first things he talked about was the ability to protect the quarterback and the ability to disrupt the opposing quarterback.
Yep.
That was the difference in the game last night.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the Eagles were able to get after Patrick Mahomes. The Chiefs could not protect him. And Jalen Hurts, outside of a few instances, had a ton of time to operate. He was kept clean. He didn't have to deal with a ton of pressure, all of that. That was the difference in the game last night. So as we talk about what lesson can the Patriots learn from Super Bowl 59, trenches, trenches, trenches. It shouldn't be lesson learned, because if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you know that's how the both of us have felt about this offseason for a while now. But if you can't protect the quarterback, you can't get after the quarterback, none of the fancy weapons matter. And that's what we saw on display last night.
Absolutely. Yeah. Look, games are still won and lost in the trenches. And I get it. Like quarterback. That's the most important position in sports. It's the most important position on the field in football. Like, you need the quarterback. You can't really get too far without at least a very good quarterback, which I would say Jalen Hurts, not necessarily the elite franchise quarterback, but a very good quarterback.
He's a legit starting quarterback.
Who had a really good game. And so, like, I got to give him credit. He played well in a big game. He just had the one interception and a couple of throws that were, I thought, questionable. But other than that, he had a great game. But, like, as long as you have a good quarterback like that who can come up big for you in a big game, the next thing is to control the trenches, protecting the quarterback and affecting the other team's quarterback. Like you were just saying, that needs to be the priority for the Patriots. They have the quarterback, thankfully. Like, I don't know how long Drake May is the quarterback, but he's the quarterback for the next few years.
Yeah.
You have all this cap space. You have Drake May on his rookie deal. You got to take advantage of that. You got to go out and bolster the lineup around him, especially the offensive line and the defensive line. Go out and sign a Josh Sweat or a Milton Williams. I would love that. My question, look, I get it. Like, they have the cap space. My question is, will they do it? I know they're capable of doing that. The question is, will they do it? And it's a little different on the offensive line. Like, Ronnie Stanley could maybe be a free agent. I just don't know that they're going to be able to get that left tackle that I really wanted to get in a free agent situation. But yeah, look, they have the cap space and they know what they need to do. And I think last night was a great night for the league, honestly. But like I've been saying, I said throughout these last 3 Super Bowl appearances for the Chiefs, like, can we get a good, complete, balanced team to actually win the Super Bowl? I said the Eagles 2 years ago. I said the Niners last year, and I said the Eagles this game. I thought they had the better all-around team than the Chiefs. And, like, the Chiefs managed to win 2 Super Bowls by basically saying, we have Patrick Mahomes and you don't. And so I'm glad that finally, mercifully caught up to the Chiefs. And, like, they can't just show up at the Super Bowl and say, well, we have the better coach and quarterback, so we're going to win just based on that. And, like, they have a few other pieces around Mahomes, obviously, but the Eagles are freaking loaded. They have the quarterback. They're dominant on both lines. They have great receivers. They got a good tight end. They got a good secondary, Cooper DeJean with the pick 6 last night. Like, they have almost no holes whatsoever in their lineup. And they have a good kicker. Jake Elliott had a good year.
I bet Doink last night, so I didn't love that. Every single one right down the middle, but he was good last night.
But I thought it was a great night for the league and a great message to the Patriots and to the rest of the league. It's like, no, you need to have a complete team to win the Super Bowl, and I think it's especially important for the Patriots to watch that. It's like, if you want to get back here, you really got to beef up on both lines, and like they have a lot of work to do. They have some pieces in place. They got Michael Wynn, who's still a good player. They have Christian Barmore on the defensive line. They have Keon White. Like, they have some pieces in place, but they still need to beef up around them, because the Eagles show, like, you can't get by with just the one good player.
Well, it's the old Belichickism. It's not about collecting talent. It's about building a team. And as you go back and you look at those 2 teams last night, as the Patriots try to build this up, what can you replicate? I don't think you can replicate Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. Like, if Drake May's that great, but that's not, you can't be like, all right, Drake, you're going to be a top 3 quarterback in the league. Like, It doesn't work that way. Mike Vrabel, I think, is a hell of a coach. Andy Reid, it took him years and years. How long was he in Philly trying to figure this out? And then a couple of years in Kansas City before it all finally clicked. So the Eagles are what you can replicate, because the Eagles are drafting well, making a couple of big free agency signings, finding players in free agency, right? Guys like Zach Bond, guys like Mekhi Becton. But I think the big thing you look at with the Eagles, all of those players they added in the draft or free agency, especially the free agents, they got better once they got to Philadelphia. There was development. It wasn't, all right, you're here, go fix the defense for us, go fix the offense for us.
That's right. Mekhi Becton's a good example.
Right.
Of that.
It was player development. So you can't just do it through the draft. You can't just do it through free agency. And even if you hit both, you got to be able to develop players. But player development, like the Patriots have put together what is a relatively impressive coaching staff. Last year, 14 coaches, position coach level or higher. So that's the head positional coaches, the coordinators, and the head coach. Of those 14, last year, 7 were in their position for the first time, including 2 of 3 coordinators. And Alex Van Pelt had been an offensive coordinator, but he hadn't really called plays. This year, it's 14 coaches, same group. 10 have been in the position they've been in before, including 2 of 3 coordinators. And the coordinator who hasn't is a longtime defensive line coach, and Mike Vrabel is going to be calling the plays, and Vrabel has been defensive coordinator. This is an experienced staff. This is a veteran staff. This is staff that has had success. The player development thing they should be able to do that.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of who it's going to be. So, like, I look at that game last night. Trenches is going to be big. Getting one of those Eagles guys up front, Josh Sweat, Milton Williams, somebody like that. Like Josh Sweat, I think PFF has him as their second ranked edge rusher available behind Khalil Mack. I'm good on Khalil Mack. I think he's still good, but he's too old for the Patriots timeline.
I think the best days are behind.
Yeah. So like Josh Sweat, if we're going to talk about Patriots free agent targets, I think Josh Sweat has to be at the top of that list or very close to it. He is a little on the smaller side, but if they're going to run this defense that they ran in Tennessee, which you talked about, like
he's the kind of guy that they're going to open space up for to make plays.
He's what, like 6'2", 250, something like that.
He's a little lean.
Yeah, the name you're going to hear a lot in the next 3 months is Harold Landry. Harold Landry's not available, but he had 41 and a half sacks during Mike Vrabel's tenure in Tennessee. It's the most of any player. He's kind of an undersized guy, but that's how they make it work. So that's a guy you got to look at. Milton Williams in the middle would certainly help, but they got to get stopping defensive tackles too. Zach Bond's going to be a free agent and is scheduled to be. I'm sure some of these guys will resign, not all of them, but some of them. But for the Patriots to tap into that, I think would be massive. You got to get a guy that you can build your pass rush around.
Yeah, first of all, like on the coaches, they finally plugged the so-called brain drain that I've been talking about for years on the Patriots coaching staff, going back to, after the 2018 season. Like, say what you want about Patricia, but they lose him, but then they lose Brian Flores. They lose McDaniels a few years later. They lose Dante Scarnecchia to retirement. They lost a lot of good, smart, experienced coaches, and they'd sort of been chasing it for years and years and years, especially in the final years of Bill Belichick. And then they go to the Jerome Mayo year with all these guys in the first year in these roles. And that was obviously a disaster. And so I think they finally went a long way towards sort of plugging that hole and getting back to a good, experienced staff with Vrabel, obviously. But then you got Terrell Williams, who's been in the league a long time. Doug Marrone, an experienced offensive line coach, obviously McDaniels. And so, I think finally there should be some development as far as the coaching and development of the team. But they need to go out and get, a big piece for both lines, I think. And I get it. Like I said, maybe they can't get their franchise left tackle that way, but get a guy that could start for you, regardless of position, honestly.
So
on the offensive line, and get that impact edge rusher on the free agent market. Josh Sweat would be ideal, but it seems like they'll have a few options there. They got to get an established guy. Yes, you got to draft well, but how likely is it that one of those guys is going to make a huge impact in year one? You got to get a guy that is going to step in day one and make an impact.
Yeah, and you can say, look, they need more than one pass rusher, so you're going to be going there. Tackle's a tougher one. I agree with you. Ronnie Stanley, I feel like, will be back in Baltimore. Alaric Jackson's name has been out there from the Rams. We'll see what direction they go. They're trading Cooper Kupp, that sort of thing. But if he's available, I think that's a guy. I'm not quitting on Will Campbell. And if you check out my mock draft this morning, I kind of explained why, but And I know some people this morning looking at that game last night, well, Joe Thuney has short arms. How can you want a short arm tackle? Joe Thuney measured in at 32 and a quarter at the combine arm length. If Will Campbell's arms are that long, he's a guard. I'm out. I'm done. I'll stop talking about it. We'll see March 2nd.
But we're talking like he could be like 32 and 7/8.
Right.
Like
so,
that, right?
And he's still training as a tackle. That was reported last month. So he clearly thinks he has a shot to do it. And I think he can be the guy. I do. Whether it's at 4, whether it's moving down to 6, I think Will Campbell can be the guy in that spot for the Patriots.
He's an interesting one because, like, he's 6'6", right? Or 6'7",
right.
6'6". So it's like he would be pretty tall for a guard just because he has that arm length. But, like, I feel like he's got the athletic ability to be a guy. He's not going to be like a bust at the NFL level. He's going to fit in somewhere.
Yeah.
And so I think long term he will be a tackle. I just feel like, is he going to be that elite, all pro left tackle that you would want him to be with the 4th overall pick, or say they trade down to 6 or 7 or whatever? Like, you got to hope that he could be that guy if you're going to draft him up that high.
I would say, especially in this draft. So I've hated this conversation that's come up. Well, you can't take Will Campbell at 4 because he's not really worth the 4th overall pick. Look where he would have gone in last year's draft. Look where he would go in next year's draft. Well, he's not in that draft.
I'm not nitpicking over his draft.
I know you're not. This is more just like general, like
you're pasting a picture of Twitter on my face and yelling at me.
He's in this draft, and you can't just tell the league, no, we don't like, none of these players are worth 4. It's a bad draft. Just we'll take the 4th pick next year. Just don't worry about it. We don't need to pick this year. Like, you can't do that, right? So maybe you trade down. That's definitely a possibility. But if you trade down, like, you don't get Campbell or Banks, you're not getting a clear answer at left tackle. You might get a project, but you're not getting a clear answer there. And if there's nobody in free agency, if Larry Jackson goes back to the Rams and Ronnie Stanley goes back to the Ravens, it's Cam Robinson. That's it. That's one guy you have to hit on. So you have to leave the door open for that, right? You just have to look at relative to the draft. And to your point, is he going to be Penei Sewell? I don't know. Probably not. Penei Sewell, I think, is the best tackle in the league. And yeah, if you're
Penei Sewell was talked about like generational tackle.
If you're taking a guy top 5, right, top 4, top 5, you probably want him to be all pro caliber. I think Campbell can flirt with that. I don't know that he's going to be, again, Sewell every single year, but if he's a top 10 left tackle in the league, in a league where there really are no good left tackles, and he is like a solid, consistent starter for a decade plus, I would say that's a good pick. I know people are going to say that that's underwhelming. You got to understand how hard it is to get a left tackle in the NFL. If you get a guy that week in, week out, you can rely on, doesn't cost you games, doesn't get the quarterback hurt, that's a win if you get that guy.
Well, I think the debate might be like him versus Mason Graham, right? Where it's like, I want the best player available at that spot. Honestly, that's why I talk about like taking a guy at 4. You want to take, you want to take the best player. Like, if we're talking about a solid starting tackle versus potentially an all-pro defensive tackle, I want the all-pro.
But what is a defensive tackle going to make the same impact? Like, that's not. Is he going to play? How often are you using him? And you got to get him and Barmore out there together. And because those are two of your best players.
We need multiple guys on the defensive line, right? We can figure that out.
I think you got to take a player in an impact position up there. Edge rusher, tackle, that sort of thing. And it's a good.
So defense. I guess to your point, like Mason Graham would have to basically be like an Aaron Donald,
right,
to really be a true impact guy at that position.
Yeah,
right?
If they're both going to be, I don't think Graham's that level of player. Right. If he was, we'd have another conversation about it. But I just don't think he's at that level. I will say this though. So, like, trenches up front though, we both agree, and I don't just think the first pick. I think they have 4 top 100 picks. I'll expand this out to linebacker, like front players, front 7, offensive line, defensive line, linebackers. I think 3 of those top 4 have to be in the trenches.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. You draft free agency, honestly, just don't. The Chiefs are a cautionary tale, Barth. Don't get caught with a Mike Caliendo situation.
Right.
Don't get Mike Caliendo, undrafted guy, playing his first year in the league last year at age 26. Like, he just got here, basically. He's like a minor league guy that just made it to the major leagues in baseball, not to cross sports.
That was like a lot of the Patriots tackles.
Yeah, that was the Patriots' whole line, other than Owenu. But like, yeah, obviously they need to beef up the whole line, but do not get caught with a Mike Caliendo type thing. Like, at least get like a more reliable, veteran guy to put in those spots, even if you're talking about just the backups. Like, you can't get caught with a situation like that. It basically cost the Chiefs a Super Bowl. You could point, if you wanted to point it to one thing.
And backups too. Like I've said this, as much as we've talked about them needing starting tackles, especially on the left side, they need backups too. Like, they don't really have answers there.
They need 4 tackles.
If you're going to address that,
okay, they need 3 tackles. I'll get Caden Wallace. I think can be a
Caden
guy.
Wallace at the very
somewhere.
least, I think, is a backup left, like solid backup right tackle.
Yeah, he can at least be your number 2 right tackle. Right. I think. I don't think he's a.
That's why I said like bust. On the left side, especially.
Okay, so
all
right. Yeah. All right, they need 3 tackles.
3 tackles.
3 tackles.
But if you're going to do that, if you're going to hammer the trenches early in the draft, right? Let's say you're going to go tackle, offensive lineman, defensive lineman, maybe a second defensive lineman or a linebacker in top 100, right? That's 3 or 4, especially at the top, that 4th pick. You got to address wide receiver through the veteran market. You have to do it. I think that is becoming more and more clear, but they can't do a half measure. So like some of these names that came out in the last week, Cooper Kupp, I'm good. 32 years old, hasn't played a full season in like 3 years. Has not had over 1,000 yards in that span.
Yeah, I mean they're working on setting into a contending team anyway. So it's not. I mean, it's not going to happen. Do that to him.
Deebo Samuel, another guy, can't stay healthy. He's a scheme touch guy, which Josh McDaniels has historically struggled with. I'm good. I mean, I wouldn't say no, but that can't be like your big addition. If he's your second addition, if it's T. Higgins and Deebo, like, okay. If it's DK Metcalf and Deebo, okay. I'm talking about as the big addition. Same goes for Kupp, but as the big addition. I would say Devontae Adams. I thought he looked good at times last year, but he's 32. Look at the track record of wide receivers after they turn 30. It's really not great. That's not a guy that's going to grow with Drake May. That's a 1-year placeholder. It's got to be Higgins, Metcalf, AJ Brown, even though they won, did not look happy at times last night.
I mean, I like AJ Brown. I'd be happy with the trade. He seems like a guy that, like, if he's not making 10 catches, if he's not getting 10, 12 targets a game, he's just unhappy, even if he's in the freaking Super Bowl.
You don't think he's going to do that here, though?
I think he would. I just think that's just sort of a complaint, I guess. I'd take him.
Fair enough. I guess the point being, like, this wide receiver class, it's interesting. There's a lot of guys that I think can be good complementary players in the draft. Guys that are really solid number 2, really solid number 3. Outside of Hunter and McMillan, maybe Luther Burden has the upside to be like a coverage dictator. So you're not getting that guy. You're not getting that guy later on. If you're not taking that guy at 4, and even at 4, you might not get that guy. I don't think Hunter or McMillan are guaranteed in that regard.
I mean, all you need to say here, Barth, is it's the Patriots. They're not going to draft a game-changing wide receiver. Just not going to happen.
Right.
I'll believe when I see it. And
the other thing about it, too, to go back to the coaching staff, the only coach on their staff who's never coached the position he's currently at is the wide receivers coach, is Todd Downing, which is an odd hire given their history, but
he's at least experienced.
He's a very
experienced
coach in
general.
Coach, yes.
I feel like a former offensive coordinator, quarterback coach, pass game coordinator, he has to have at least some grasp.
So what I think,
my question is, can he manage the egos in the room? I think you need to have that sort of ability.
So I think he'll be able to do that. And what I think he'll be able to do really well is teach the system, like teach the responsibilities, the routes, the assignments. It's more the technique stuff.
Yeah.
Where I would have liked to see them get an assistant wide receivers coach who maybe has more background there.
Yeah.
Especially if they're going to draft somebody high, which gets back to my point of, again, you want the top free agents here at wide receiver, so they may have to get creative and do a trade. This is PFF's rankings.
It drops off pretty quick, right?
Yeah. So T. Higgins is number 1 overall player, number 1 wide receiver, number 2 wide receiver, number 4 player, Chris Godwin.
I like Chris Godwin. He's coming off an injury.
Hate it. That's probably the floor of, I'm like, all right. Like, I think he can dictate coverage. He's got good speed.
I think he's a good fit for Drake May, throwing over the middle of the field, throwing him open.
Yeah. He's 28, so you got a couple years there. A little bit longer sustained bridge. There is the injury history, but there's that. Player number 7, wide receiver 3, Amari Cooper. Fell off at the end there in Buffalo where they had no receivers.
I hate a guy who's inconsistent from game to game.
Yeah.
Like he'll have a monster game and then get completely shut down.
I don't know how much you've looked into Ted McMillan. You're going to hate Ted McMillan.
If that's the book on him.
50% of his receiving yards this year came in 4 games.
Okay, I'm all set.
Wide receiver, that was 3, was Cooper. Wide receiver number 4, total rank 11, Stephon Diggs. Wouldn't hate it in theory, but 31-year-old coming off a torn ACL.
Another guy who seems like a real pain in the ass.
If they were to add, well, so he was a captain last year in Houston his first year. He really bought in there. If they were to get, again, that like top receiver and then added Diggs, that would be awesome. That's probably my best case scenario. DeAndre Hopkins, after last night, how you feeling?
Oh, he's cooked.
Hollywood Brown, and now we're just getting into guys that like aren't coverage dictators. Darius Slayton, a fit, but he's again a complimentary player. Keenan Allen at this point.
Yeah, like
career,
they have Darius
complimentary, right? And then they're just rounding out their guys in the top 100. Two more. Deontay Johnson. You want to talk about a pain in the ass?
God, he's been on like 8 teams the last 3 years.
Yeah, and then Mike Williams, who just can't stay healthy.
See, here's my take on the whole thing: is that like, as much as I say like you can get by with just a good, decent group on the offensive line that just plays well as a group, I feel like you can't get by with just decent at that wide receiver. Like, I think that's why like it's a good debate between like line and receiver. Like, you got to be able to block, yes. But even if you can block, you're not going to win a lot of games with just average receivers. Like a quarterback can elevate, but you got to have a go-to guy. You got to have like good players. You can't just have average receivers.
I think one great wide receiver can make average wide receivers better.
Even just the one guy. If they got Higgins, for example, you push everyone down the depth chart. I think Higgins, Hunter Henry, Kendrick Bourne, Demario Douglas, Keyshawn, but like that's a pretty good group. You put a real number one receiver on top of them.
It's representative. That's going to be probably about middle of the league.
I think if you can block that. I think Drake May is good enough to sort of make it work with that group. And then, I'm not saying they're going to go back to the Super Bowl next year, but like I just think he needs that number one guy, and I think the rest of the groups, receivers, tight ends, it would work itself out.
Yeah. So you're out on most of those older trade veterans.
Not that can't be like their big move.
Right. I mean? As the wide receiver.
I would take a Chris Godwin. I would take Darius Slayton, but that can't be like, this is our big move at wide receiver. That can't be it.
I think Godwin's probably the floor for the big move at receiver for me. Like if it's Godwin and then you like really beef up the offensive line. Cause I think
I'd rather come out of next season saying they got to find Drake May a receiver rather than, oh my God, we just went through a whole other season where they couldn't block they're going to get the quarterback killed. I'd rather beef up the offensive line first.
And look, they have too many needs. They're not going to get it all done in one offseason too. Like there needs to be a recognition of that. So if you get Godwin and then it's trenches, I wouldn't love it. I'd be okay with it, but
that might be the best they could do though, as far as like really bolstering the roster
unless they
get
Higgins.
Yeah, Higgins would be a difference maker.
But like Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel, I'm good on that being the big wide receiver addition needs to be more than that, I think. Doesn't mean you can't add them, but you can't add those guys and be done. I don't think that's enough. Any other thoughts on the offseason here before we wrap it up?
Oh, well, I have a thought on the Chiefs in that game.
Okay.
Like, they might change the rules in the offseason to benefit teams and stuff. Are they going to do something about the offensive line problems with the Chiefs where like they got to start practicing more? We got to have better offensive line play, guys. Because I think it's a bigger problem with the league, not just last night, where these offensive lines going into the season, they're not ready to play. They get to the end of the season, they're all getting hurt. You got Mike Caliendo starting in a Super Bowl. Joe Thuney playing left tackle
today.
I know, seriously. I sorry.
You're probably not the only one.
But I apologize to Mike Caliendo. It's not his fault. It's a not his fault situation. It's not his fault that he was dependent on to start in a Super Bowl. Where it's like these guys get hurt, they're not ready to go. Like, are we going to sort of see maybe a change where it's like, all right, we need to get these guys working more in the offseason, practice more, something like that. Like, because I feel like the Chiefs especially, but it's not just the Chiefs. I feel like this is across the league almost, except for pretty much just the Eagles are the only team that doesn't really have this problem where it's like guys get hurt and they're just not ready to go. Where it's like, I feel like that's something that needs to change. And maybe the Chiefs' struggles in that game could maybe be the wake-up call to the league that something needs to change.
I've said this for a while that like the offensive line issues in the league, some of it is just that you're going through a lull in the talent available. It happens at every position. It's cyclical, right? Surpluses and shortages, but the lack of practice kills that position more than any other.
Yeah.
Problem is the league's pushing for that 18th game. And I don't know if you saw some of that stuff last week where like the players union is not happy. So you're going to put more practice time on top of that. No, maybe that's the trade-off. All right. We're going to play 17 games, but they need to be 17 better games. You guys are going to have to practice more in the summer. Maybe that's the trade-off. We're not getting both. I'd be shocked if we get more physical practices and an 18th game. I would be very surprised. I know what we got to do. What'd you think of the halftime show?
Oh, I love Kendrick Lamar. He's one of my favorite artists of,
Yeah.
Ever since he broke out, 10, 11 years ago. Like, he's one of my favorite artists. I didn't think that was a great halftime show. I didn't like the song choices. He didn't didn't do a single song off what I think is still his best album, Good Kid, Mad City. I guess that's old news by now, but he had good songs that he could have played off that album. I didn't like the song choices. I thought his lip syncing was terrible. How they sort of record it in rehearsal and then you have to lip sync that. So it sort of sounds live, but it's not really live. I thought his lip syncing was bad. I thought the song choices were bad. The performance aspect of it, I like Samuel L. Jackson, the whole Uncle Sam thing was a little odd, you know what I mean? And so I'm not with I feel like it showed a generational divide between the older football fans who I knew going into it that the Jerry Callahans of the world were going to hate the halftime show. And all those guys were going to say this is the worst halftime show ever. I knew that was going to happen. But even as a Kendrick Lamar fan, I just thought that didn't really have enough to offer. And I think there's all kinds of great shows that they could put on where it's a guy that doesn't have a lot of great hits. I don't necessarily say that. I just think, honestly, live rap in general, I don't know. The only rap shows I've ever been to that really blew me away were Jay-Z, which was 15 years ago at this point, and Kanye, two fine gentlemen. But those are the only rap shows that I really came out of it saying that was a great, great show. I feel like generally you gotta have some sort of musical instrument going. Well,
one of the critiques I saw with Kendrick was he could have done more to bring out guests.
Yeah.
So maybe definitely. That would help.
SZA was the only one, basically. Right?
I get why he did it. Just him. I think for what he wanted to accomplish, that was a great show. I think he had a message. He delivered the message effectively.
Oh yeah, I have no problem with the message. If you hate the message, then that probably struck a chord with you. A minor.
I enjoyed it for what it was. I was a little bummed there wasn't more of his older stuff too. I'm with you on that. I understand why there wasn't.
But he's not. You can't do backseat freestyle at the Super Bowl. I guess that's sort of
it's tough to clean some of that stuff up too. For what it was about what I expected. I don't think it exceeded expectation. I don't remember a halftime show getting more hype for a while than this one. This had to be one of the most hyped halftime shows because of everything that's happened.
I think it's because it was unsafe. It wasn't a safe pick. It was Kendrick's a true artist, no matter what you say.
Good,
about him.
Good on the NFL for that.
Yeah.
But, for what the hype was, it was about there. I don't know.
There wasn't as off spectacle, I thought. It should be a spectacle, that show.
See, it was more of a spectacle than I actually thought it was good. I thought it was just going to be him up there delivering. And they had the dancers. They did some of the choreographed stuff.
Yeah, the American flag coordinated
all the people coming out of the car.
Interesting, I guess.
The Samuel L. Jackson stuff. So there's actually more of that than I thought. I enjoyed it. I don't know that it's my favorite of all time. It's definitely not I didn't hate it. It was good. I'm curious to see who does next year.
I think the bad lip syncing sort of bothered me.
I thought he did more. I wasn't paying as much attention to lip syncing as I thought he did more actual vocals than most people do. He was because they have that. It's that technology, right? Where when you start talking to the mic, the backing track gets cut out.
Yeah.
I thought he did most of that himself. You might have a better eye for this than me, but I thought he did most of that himself, which was impressive because a lot of people, they're I feel under 50% when it comes to them actually.
Yeah. I think
rating it.
I think most of the time it's they they perform it in a rehearsal.
Right.
They record that. And then they lip sync to that. So it's not they're not lip syncing to the actual song. You know what I mean? It's that's sort of how they make it look like a live performance.
Right.
That's why it sort of bothered me because I don't think he's used to that. I think he's used to doing it all himself, which is why I think it's sort of, it looked a little off to me. You know what? My idea for a halftime show, honestly, why don't they get one of these DJs that has a bunch of hits with a bunch of different singers and then you have all those famous singers come out? Does that make sense? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Calvin Harris had "We Found Love" with Rihanna, and probably another few other songs.
DJ Khaled already does a ton.
DJ
with the NFL.
Khaled has Justin Bieber and you can bring out a bunch of stars and a bunch of hit songs that everyone knows.
That's kind of what the one in LA was a couple years ago. Snoop Dogg and Eminem and 50 Cent. Kendrick was there, and that was good. That was really good.
I feel like they're gonna start doing that because we're kind of running out of artists that have this huge, deep catalog of hit songs that everybody knows. It's really not. That's not what it's like anymore.
Right. Or maybe you just do it they used to do and it wasn't like a whole run, but they would have like multiple artist halftime shows.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe you go back to that. It'll be interesting to see. Everybody thinks it's going to be Taylor Swift next year. She's not going to do, what do you get? Like 9 minutes, I think it is, right? 10 minutes.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't
She's not going to do a 10-minute. That's not how she performs. She's not going to do a 10-minute thing, but
she's going to do it eventually. She's too big of a name.
Yeah, probably.
Just to break up with Kelsey first, then maybe.
Yeah. Does that last after that game? He was terrible last night.
She needs to jump ship.
All right, well, that'll do it for us on this episode of Sports Hub Patriots podcast. If you want more, check out 985thesportshub.com, Sports Hub Patriots audio feed, wherever you get your podcasts, also the Sports Hub YouTube channel. I'm working on a guest to do some draft stuff and some coaching stuff. This will be a lot of fun. I don't have an exact date for that, but that's coming, so subscribe. You'll get it.
Yeah, stay tuned. We do have big plans coming
and
for
me
you
and Matt have more coming as
side.
well. Are we doing, there's a holiday next week on Monday. Are you here next week?
Next week, I believe, is the Four Nations on Monday in Boston. So
okay.
I think I'm going to be at that. We'll see.
Okay. We'll have some, if not next week, 2 weeks from now, we'll do our combine preview because the combine starts 2 weeks from Wednesday. So the two of us will be back in 2 weeks, if not next week. I'll have some more tidbits in between here and there. So again, make sure you subscribe. Until the next one, for Matt Dolloff, I'm Alex Barth. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time.